Welcome, dear students. Today we will be looking at an interesting poem in English that is taken from Unit 4, 4.3, The Bees. This video is presented by Grecienne Misquitta. The images used in this video are taken from different internet websites. This poem is written by William Shakespeare. William Shakespeare was born in Warwickshire in England in the year 1564. He was an English poet, dramatist, also known as a playwright, as well as an actor. He is well known and has a unique personality in the world of literature. Shakespeare is deemed as a very important man in the literary world today because his plays and poems represent people and the different types of situation that we recognize today. His characters represent the emotional reality of the present time, and his plays are easy to connect to the family situations, to falling in love, and to war, etc. Shakespeare's plays, also known as the Shakespearean plays, have gained a lot of popularity in the world today. The fact that his plays are performed and also adapted around the world underscores the universal appeal of his storytelling. William Shakespeare died on April 23, 1616 in England. He left us with beautiful works which are cherished by people all across the world. Well, now, students, let us look at the plays written by Shakespeare. There are approximately 38 dramatic plays written by Shakespeare. The plays portray different genres such as tragedy, comedy, history, romance. His plays are widely known and popular in the English language and are continually performed in the world today. Humor is a key element in all of Shakespeare's plays. Although large amount of his comical talent is evident in his comedies, some of the most entertaining scenes and characters are found in tragedies such as Hamlet and histories such as Henry IV Part 1. Shakespeare's plays are notable because his characters make a speech to him or herself so the audience can understand the character's inner motivation and conflicts. In the world of literary drama, this playwright plays are performed at the theatre as well as at the educational level. Some of the most famous plays written by William Shakespeare are Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, Macbeth, The Merchant of Venice, Othello, etc. Shakespeare is not only known for his plays but also for his poems and sonnets. William Shakespeare is also widely regarded as the greatest writer in English language. He was a famous English poet and playwright and the world's preeminent dramatist. Though he is most renowned for his plays, Shakespeare's poetry also remains to be popular. He is often called England's national poet and the Bard of Avon. His extant works include 38 plays, 154 sonnets, two long narrative poems. Almost all the sonnets follow the structure of three quatrains or four-line stanzas. Some of the most famous literary poet works by William Shakespeare are The Phoenix and the Turtle, A Lover's Complaint, Sonnet 130, etc. Well now, students, let us look at the poem, The Bees. So work the honey bees, creatures that by a rule in nature teach the art of order to a peopled kingdom. They have a king and officers of sorts, where some, like magistrates, correct at home, others, like soldiers, armed in their stings, make booth upon the summer's velvet buds, which pillage they with merry march bring home to the tent royal of their emperor, who, busied in his majesty surveys the singing masons building roofs of gold, the civil citizens kneading up the honey, the poor mechanic porters crowding in their heavy burdens at his narrow gate, the sad-eyed justice with his surly hum, delivering over to executor's bail the lazy yawning drone. Students, let's now try to understand the poem. Let's start by looking at the first three lines of the poem. So work the honeybees, creatures that by a rule in nature teach the art of order to a peopled kingdom. They have a king and officers of sorts. In the poem, the poet William Shakespeare gives a vivid description of the bees and their kingdom. He calls the honey bees creatures that teach us the art of order of human beings. In the first line, we understand that how the honey bees are creatures that are able to teach us or we can learn from them. In the second line, we look at what the honeybees are trying to teach us. The honeybees are trying to teach us how to live an organized life, of how we can live our life in order. The third line tells us that the bees have an officer and a king. The officers are there for different activities. In short, we can understand that the bees have a king and different officers carrying out different activities in the bees' kingdom. Moving on to the next line of the poem, where some, like magistrate, correct at home, others, like merchants, venture trade abroad, others, like soldiers, armed in their strings, make boot upon the summer's velvet buds, which pillage they with merry march bring home. Here we need to understand that magistrate is a civil officer who takes care or administers the law. But in the poem, the magistrate sees to it that the things are correctly done at home, which means the hive. The next line talks about the merchant bees. Like the merchant bees venture out or take up a new activity to trade abroad with their honey goods. The next three lines of the poem talks about soldier bees who are armed with their stings. It is a pointed organ at the end of the bee's abdomen. They begin to collect from the summer flower buds, loot the flowers, and come home with what they have collected. Now, let us move on to the next four lines of the poem, that is, to the tent royal of their emperor, who, busied in his majesty surveys, the singing masons building roofs of gold, the civil citizens kneading up honey. As we saw, the soldier bees, who are armed with their stings, loot the summer's newly opened flowers and bring the loot home merrily. Then they take it to the place where the emperor sits. The first and second line means that the king or emperor bee is sitting in his royal tent when the soldier bees get the loot. He is also busy and very engrossed in checking to see if the other bees are well organized and doing their work as it should be done. He supervises the building of the beehive. The third and the fourth line talks about how the emperor is busy supervising the buzzing masons bees as they are building the golden hive. Masons are those people who are well skilled in cutting, laying, and arranging stones in the building. In this poem context, the mason bees are singing along as they are building their roofs of gold, which refers to their honeycomb, and the color gold refers to the color of the honey. The fourth line tells us the responsibility of the citizen bees. The civilian bees are converting the nectar into honey. Kneading means to mix it properly and equally the nectar that is brought from the flowers. Let's move on to the next few lines of the poem. The poor mechanic potters crowding in, their heavy burdens at his narrow gate, the sad-eyed justice with his surly hum, delivering over to executor's praise, the lazy yawning drone. The next two lines tell us how the potter bees are bringing their heavy burdens of nectar to the king and are trying to get in through the narrow gate of the hive. As well as the last three lines tell us how the judge or justice has sad eyes and has a bad temper, and he hands over or delivers the lazy bee, that is the lazy yawning drone, to the light colored executor, that is the pale executor, to carry out the death sentence laid by him. Well, students, now let's look at the summary of the poem. The poem is written by William Shakespeare. Here, the poet tells us about the kingdom of the bees, which is that like the people kingdom, and its function and has officers like that of the people's kingdom. The poet gives a vivid description of the bee's kingdom in a lyrical form, through which we came to know that the life of the insect is not that simple the way we think. They work by rules. If we observe their lives, we can see that they also live an organized life. They also have rules and laws that they have to follow. Among them, they have different officers, just like we have. In this poem, we observe that in the bees' hives, there are different bees engaged in different types of activities, such as merchants, magistrates, soldiers, masons, potters, and civil citizens. The lives of bees are organized in an ordered way. Each one has his own work to do, and all the work is done very well by everyone. They naturally have learnt the art of order. Even though they are small insects, they have the capacity and the capability of teaching us humans how to live an organized life. Well, the poet wants to remind us that honeybees live an organized life. All of us humans must be like them. They have among them different bees carrying out different responsibilities. All these have their own jobs to do and they do it very well. Well, now students, let us look at the poetic devices used in this poem, starting off with the rhyming words and the rhyming scheme of the poem. The poem does not have a rhyme scheme. Such verses are called as free verse. Moving on to the next device, that is imagery. The poet has used imagery to show us how the bees do their jobs according to what they are. Example, the mason building roofs of gold, soldiers armed in their stings, the lazy yawning drone. The poem is full of attractive lines that way. And the last poetic device we are going to talk about is the tone of the poem or the tonality of the poem. The poem has a reflective and serious tone. It also shows admiration for the organization of the bee. Moving on to the next part, that is the figures of speech found in the poem. We find two types of figures of speech in the poem, that is alliteration and onomatopoeia. Alliteration means the repetition of the same sound or letter at the beginning of words in a phrase. And onomatopoeia means it includes words which evoke the actual sound of the thing they refer to or describe. The boom of a firework exploding, or the tick-tock of a clock, etc. Now, students, let us look at the examples of the different figures of speech that we just discussed. Which pillage they with merry march bring home. This is an alliteration, repetition of the sound of the letter M. The second example is the civil citizens kneading up the honey. Again, this is an example of alliteration, repetition of the sound of the letter C. The singing masons building roofs of gold. This is an example of onomatopoeia. The word singing indicates the sound. Well, students, now let us have a quick discussion to see if you have understood this poem. The first question is, what do honeybees teach us? Well, you understood this very well. Honeybees teach us to work according to rules. Each one of us has a different job to do and we must do it well. They teach us to live an organized life. The second question is, where does the emperor bee sit and what does he do? Very well, students, you answered this as well. The emperor bee is seated in the royal tent, very engrossed in what is going on. He surveys the singing masons building roofs of gold. The third question here is, what do roofs of gold refer to? Roofs of gold refer to the honeycombs. The color of honey is golden, hence the honeycombs are referred to roofs of gold. And the last question, students, it is, mention the members of the honeycomb or bees' webs that are given in the poem with their duties. Well, students, this is also a very easy and interesting answer. We know that there are several members mentioned in the poem. The emperor who sees to building the hive, the magistrate sees that things are correctly done in the hive, the merchant bee ventures out to trade abroad, the soldier bees are armed with their stings, bring home honey looted from the flowers, the mason bees building roofs of gold, the civilian bees kneading up the honey, the potter bees carrying heavy burdens, and the judge bee delivering the lazy yawning drones over to be executed for their laziness. Well, dear students, thank you and hope you all enjoyed this video.